Here's a fun fact that should terrify every famous person alive. The government agency that took down the deadliest gangster in American history wasn't the FBI. It wasn't a SWAT team. It was a room full of accountants. Today, we're counting down 7 celebrities who looked at the most feared 3 letters in America, the IRS, and said, nah, I'm different. Movie stars, rappers, a country legend, and a guy from a tanning show. Some of them tried insane legal theories. Some just spent the money on dinosaur skulls. And one of them owed so much that he recorded an entire album with the tax collector as his business partner. Stick around, because number 1 didn't just lose to the IRS. He teamed up with them and somehow came out looking like a hero. Let's get into it. Number 7, Ja Rule. Early 2000s, Ja Rule was everywhere. Duets with Jennifer Lopez, duets with Ashanti, always on time, playing out of every single car window in America. The man was printing money. And here's the thing about printing money. The IRS notices. Between 2004 and 2006, Ja Rule pulled in more than $3 million. And in those years, he filed exactly 0 tax returns. Not late ones, not sloppy ones, 0. Now, his defense was almost sweet. He basically told the court, look, I was a young guy who suddenly had a mountain of cash. Nobody taught me how to handle it. I made mistakes. And honestly, relatable. But here's the part that stings. The judge did not care even a little bit. She hit him with a line that should be tattooed on every celebrity's forehead. Paying taxes, she said, is not something you get to decide to do. It's not optional. He got 28 months. The twist that makes this one great, though, Ja Rule was already in prison when the tax sentence came down. He was serving state time on a gun charge. So the tax time just got stacked on top, served at the same time. And here's the cherry. This is the same Ja Rule who, a few years later, would co-organize the Fire Festival, the most legendary disaster party of all time. So if you're keeping track, this man lost to the IRS and to a music festival. When the universe tells you to stop scheming, listen. But at least Ja Rule just forgot to file. Our next guy actually built a system to hide the money on purpose. Number 6. Mike, The Situation, Sorrentino. If you were alive in 2010, you knew the abs. Jersey Shore, gym, tan, laundry. The Situation turned a 6-pack and a spray tan into a genuine empire. Merch, appearances, whole companies built around the brand. Between 2010 and 2012, he and his brother raked in almost $9 million. Here's where it gets dumb in a very specific way. The Situation didn't just skip his taxes. He tried to be clever. When you deposit $10,000 or more in cash, the bank has to report it to the government. It's an automatic flag. So Sorrentino allegedly started breaking his cash deposits into smaller chunks, each one just under that $10,000 line, hoping to slip under the radar. That has a name. It's called structuring. And prosecutors love it, because it's basically a signed confession. An honest mistake doesn't carefully deposit $9,000 at a time. Only someone who knows exactly what they're hiding does that. That one clever move is what turned him from a guy who owed money into a guy who looked like a criminal. He got 8 months. His brother Mark, who was even more tangled up in it, got 2 years. And in the single most Jersey Shore detail imaginable, when Mike showed up to court to be sentenced, the entire cast came with him, and they all showed up dressed head to toe in black. Snooki, JWoww, Paulie D, standing outside a federal courthouse like it was a funeral. Which, for his bank account, it kind of was. The Situation at least made his money and hid it. Our next guy made an absolute fortune, and then set fire to it in the most spectacular way possible. Number 5, Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage was, for a stretch there, the highest paid actor in Hollywood. We're talking a $150 million fortune. And what he did with that money is less a financial story and more a fever dream. Buckle up. Cage bought 2 castles, one in England and an 11th century one in Germany. He bought a private island in the Bahamas. He bought a Gulfstream jet. He bought, and I need you to know this is real, a 9-foot-tall pyramid tomb in a New Orleans cemetery, which he still owns, waiting for the day he dies. He bought shrunken heads. He bought albino king cobras, and then had to buy the anti-venom to keep them from killing him. And in the crown jewel of rich guy nonsense, he spent $276,000 on a 67-million-year-old dinosaur skull, personally outbidding Leonardo DiCaprio for it. A skull he later had to give back, because it turned out to be stolen from Mongolia. So when the IRS came knocking with a $6 million bill, Nick Cage did not have $6 million in cash. He had a dinosaur. The lien eventually ballooned to around $14 million. Now, here's Cage's move, and it's the classic celebrity play. He blamed his money manager, sued the guy for $20 million, said the man ran his finances into the ground. The manager fired right back and said, "Are you kidding me? This man spent $33 million in a single year on real estate and art and a dinosaur. What exactly was I supposed to do? To his credit, Cage didn't run and hide. He did the most Nicolas Cage thing possible. He just started saying yes to every single movie on planet Earth to work his way out of the hole. Every straight-to-streaming thriller you've ever scrolled past. That was a man paying off the IRS, one questionable script at a time. He even sold the first ever Superman comic for over $2 million, and it worked. By 2022, he was debt-free, dug out entirely by sheer volume of work. Somewhere in America, a man watched Nicolas Cage fight a CGI monster in a movie you've never heard of, with no idea he was witnessing a tax payment in real time. Respect the grind. Cage spent his way into trouble. Our next one refused to pay on principle. And her reason is one of the wildest things anyone has ever said in a courtroom. Number 4, Lauryn Hill. Lauryn Hill is a genuine genius. The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill won 5 Grammys. It's on every greatest albums of all time list ever made. This is not a talentless person. This is one of the most gifted musicians of her generation, which makes what happened next so strange. Between 2005 and 2007, Hill made over $1.5 million and didn't file her taxes. And when the government came calling, she did not say, "Oops, my bad." She went philosophical. She posted this long message online explaining that she had essentially gone underground, that she'd removed herself from a system she described as a media-protected military-industrial complex. That's a real thing, she wrote. And then in court, at her actual sentencing, she compared the whole situation to slavery. She talked about being a descendant of slaves, about being treated like a cash cow instead of a person, and said, and I'm keeping this short, that if her situation wasn't like slavery, she didn't know what was. Now look, there are real and painful conversations to be had about the music industry and how it treats black artists. That's genuine. But the IRS is not the venue for that argument, and a judge is not going to accept, "I opted out of society" as a tax strategy. Here's the detail that tells you she knew that deep down. On the eve of her sentencing, suddenly, out of nowhere, she paid it. Over $500,000 to the feds, another $420,000 to New Jersey, nearly $1 million materializing overnight from a woman who'd spent months explaining she was outside the system. She still did 3 months in prison. Hill turned it into a philosophy lecture. Our next guy turned it into an actual legal theory and genuinely seemed to believe it. Number 3, Wesley Snipes. Blade. Demolition Man. White Men Can't Jump. In the 90s, Wesley Snipes was a bona fide action star at the absolute top of the game. And then he fell down a rabbit hole that a lot of people fall down, and almost none of them climb back out of. Snipes got involved with a group of tax protesters. These are people who believe, with total sincerity, that federal income tax is secretly illegal, that the IRS has no real authority, and that if you just say the right magic legal words, you don't have to pay. Snipes went all in. He leaned on a specific discredited argument, argued at various points that he was a non-resident alien of the United States, which he was born in Florida, and treated the IRS like it was a scam that only suckers fell for. He stopped filing, and then he went a step further into full supervillain territory. He filed amended returns for years he'd already paid, demanding the government refund him around $11 million it never actually owed him. He didn't just refuse to pay, he tried to bill them. It did not work. And here's the wild part. A jury actually acquitted him of the serious felony charges, which honestly was a huge win. All he had left were 3 misdemeanor counts for failing to file. Misdemeanors? The kind of thing that usually gets you probation. But the judge was so annoyed by his whole tax denier crusade that he handed Snipes the absolute maximum. 3 full years in federal prison for misdemeanors. Almost unheard of. And the sequel is the best part. Years later, his civil tax bill had grown to around $23.5 million. The IRS, being reasonable, offered to settle the whole thing for about $9.5 million. And Wesley Snipes, action hero, looked at that $9.5 million offer and counted with $842,000, roughly 4 cents on the dollar. The IRS said no, obviously. You cannot haggle with the tax man like he's a guy at a flea market, but you have to respect the audacity and notice the pattern forming across this whole list. Snipes didn't invent the non-resident alien nonsense in his bedroom. He paid so-called tax experts who sold that theory as a product, promoters who got prosecuted right alongside him. Cage blamed his manager. Nelson got buried by his accountants. Over and over, the move is the same. Surround yourself with people who tell you the rules don't apply to you and then act shocked when the government disagrees. The IRS has heard every one of these theories before, and it has a perfect record against all of them. Snipes thought the IRS wasn't real. Our number 2 knew it was very real and simply believed he was bigger than it. He was wrong. Number 2, Al Capone. This is the one, the original. In 1920s, Chicago, Al Capone ran everything. Bootlegging, gambling, and a level of violence the country had never seen, widely blamed for the street Valentine's Day massacre, where 7 men were machine gunned against a wall. He was pulling in an estimated $30 million a year in 1920s money. He wore custom suits and diamond rings and treated the city like his personal kingdom, and the law could not touch him. They couldn't pin the murders on him. They couldn't make the bootlegging charges stick. Every time they got close, a witness would vanish or a juror would get very rich very quickly. Capone reportedly bragged that they couldn't collect legal taxes on illegal money. That was his whole worldview. If the money came from crime, how could the taxman possibly have a claim on it? That sentence right there is why he died a broken man, because a small team of Treasury accountants took that exact logic and turned it into a cage. The Supreme Court had already ruled that yes, illegal income is absolutely taxable. And here was Capone, one of the richest men in America, who had never filed a single tax return in his life. He didn't even own things in his own name. He thought that made him a ghost. It actually made him a target. They dug through years of hidden ledgers and receipts to prove how much he was really making. And here's the detail almost nobody knows. The one that truly sank him. His own lawyer, trying to negotiate a settlement, wrote the government a letter more or less admitting that yes, Capone earned a fortune over those years. Capone's own legal team handed the prosecution a written confession of income. In a tax case, that letter was gold. The most careful criminal in America was undone not by a snitch, but by his own attorney's paperwork. And when Capone realized the walls were closing in, he tried his old tricks. He tried to bribe the jury, but the judge got tipped off. And in a genuinely legendary move, right before the trial started, he swapped his entire jury with the jury from another courtroom down the hall. Every bribe Capone paid, wasted, on 12 people who were now sitting in a different trial. He was convicted, not for murder, not for bootlegging, for paperwork. 11 years, the longest tax sentence anyone had ever gotten. They shipped him to Alcatraz, where the warden refused to be intimidated and stripped away his name entirely. The most feared man in America became inmate AZ-85, doing laundry in a prison on a rock in the ocean. The gangster who thought he was untouchable got taken down by a math problem, which brings us to number 1. And this is the twist, because our final guy is the only person on this entire list who looked the IRS dead in the eye, lost completely, and somehow still won. Number 1, Willie Nelson. By 1990, Willie Nelson was maybe the most beloved man in country music, and he was about to get the worst news of his life. The IRS said he owed them, at one estimate, over $30 million. Later pinned down to a still catastrophic $16.7 million. Not because Willie was hiding cash in his mattress. His accountants had stuffed his money into a tax shelter scheme that the IRS later ruled was completely illegal. Willie got wrecked by bad advice. So, on November 9th, 1990, federal agents raided him. They seized nearly everything: his ranch, his recording studio, properties across 6 states, his gold records, his master tapes, all of it, padlocked and hauled off to auction. But Willie saw it coming. And in the most Willie Nelson move of all time, before the agents arrived, he had his daughter sneak out the one thing he refused to lose: his guitar. A battered old instrument named Trigger. As long as he had that guitar, he figured he'd be fine. And here's where the story turns from tragedy into legend. Because when the government auctioned off Willie's stuff, his fans showed up. Farmers he'd helped through his Farm Aid concerts. A guy who bought his entire ranch at auction purely so he could hand it right back to Willie. Regular people buying his possessions and returning them one by one. Because you just do not do Willie Nelson dirty. And then, Willie pulled off the greatest financial jiu-jitsu move in celebrity history. He cut a deal with the IRS to record a brand new album, just him and Trigger, and split the profits directly with the taxman to pay down the debt. He called it the IRS tapes. Pull by my memories. He went on national TV wearing a shirt with a 1-800 number to order it. He basically turned his own financial ruin into a product, and made the Internal Revenue Service his record label. It didn't erase the whole debt on its own, but combined with a lawsuit he won against the accounting firm that got him into the mess, Willie paid the entire thing off by 1993. He kept his guitar, he got his ranch back, and he came out the other side more of a folk hero than ever. So that's the ranking. Some of them tried crazy legal theories. Some tried to hide it, some spent it on a dinosaur. But here's the lesson underneath all 7 of these stories, and it's the same one every single time. It doesn't matter how famous you are, how good your lawyers are, or how untouchable you feel. Capone couldn't beat them. Snipes couldn't out-argue them. The only person who ever really came out on top just shrugged, picked up his guitar, and made them a business partner. Now, I've got a question for you, and I actually want to know, out of all 7, Whose excuse was the most ridiculous? Team, the IRS isn't real, Wesley Snipes, or team, I deposited $9,000 on purpose, situation? Drop your pick in the comments because I genuinely can't decide. And if you had fun watching rich people lose to a room full of accountants, you're going to want to stick around. There's a whole lot more where this came from. See you in the next one.